There's something the top 1% understand about artificial intelligence that most people don't. And that gap is already determining who panics and who adapts and who quietly compounds advantage over the next decade. Most people are reacting to AI emotionally. They're just going off of what their friends have told them or one YouTube video. But there's a smaller group that's reacting structurally. In the same way, we have an advantage here at my channel because we're in the know-how of crypto and digital currencies. I thought I would cover AI today and one of the most remarkable conversations I have seen lately between Jensen, the CEO of NVIDIA, the world's largest company, and Joe Rogan. And he addresses multiple topics I think are very important to go over with you today. And they're actually philosophical points that I have been saying and feeling and talking about in my circle of conversation. So I wanted to bring them to you today because these conversation points will decide who gets pulled into headline-driven fear and who builds leverage, while everyone else argues about speculative outcomes on what's going to happen once AGI becomes sentient. And here's the critical point most conversations and most people miss, okay? The biggest risk with AI is not a future moment where everything suddenly breaks, okay? The real risk is misunderstanding what kind of system AI already is and mispricing and overlooking the opportunity sitting directly in front of us right now. So let's start with the misunderstanding driving most people. All right, so let's start off with how AI actually works, because everything else depends on getting this part right. Modern AI operates as a reasoning system that maps inputs to outputs. You give it examples, you define what a correct answer looks like first, and over time, it learns the statistical relationship that connects the two, the input and the output. That's the core mechanism. So essentially, there's no inner monologue, no self-awareness, no lived experience occurring behind the interface or consciousness. What feels intelligent is the system's ability to recognize patterns at scale and generate probabilistic, coherent responses. Jensen uses a technical phrase that sounds complex but describes something simple. He calls AI a universal function approximator. In plain terms, once a system sees enough examples of this leads to that, like an Excel spreadsheet, it infers the relationship on its own. Show it enough images, and it learns visual structure. Feed it enough language, and it learns how meaning tends to flow. It predicts what comes next based on prior patterns. This is not a controversial claim. OpenAI's own technical documentation describes large language models as probabilistic systems that predict the next most likely token given context and training data. It is pattern completion operating at a massive scale. Where the public conversation goes wrong is here. People ask whether AI is becoming conscious or sentient. That question feels profound, but it misdirects the discussion. Intelligence and consciousness are not the same thing. They're not in the same category. Intelligence, on the one hand, refers to problem solving and pattern recognition. Consciousness refers to subjective experience and awareness. Yann LeCun, one of the architects of modern deep learning, has been explicit that today's AI systems operate without awareness or internal experience, even as capabilities expand. Philosophers draw the same boundary. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy separates intelligence from consciousness for precisely this reason. Once that distinction clicks, much of the fear loses its emotional charge. The system feels powerful because it reasons quickly and broadly, and we don't know how it works, frankly, right? So we give more power to things we don't understand sometimes. The outputs feel human because they mirror human data, but resemblance and identity operate on different levels. And misunderstanding that distinction leads directly to the next fear. So let's talk about what Jensen says will be a future where AI gets gradually embedded into everything in our lives, and that this AI integration will not be explosive. There won't be a moment in which it takes over our whole lives. It'll happen gradually. If you've been following AI research and developments online like I do, the dominant fear narrative goes like this. At some point, AI wakes up. At some point, it crosses a line. At some point, everything changes overnight. However, Jensen rejects that framing entirely, and I actually agree, which is why I'm bringing you this video once again. He explains that AI progress does not arrive as a single discontinuity. It moves in increments, small visible steps. Systems stay a click ahead, not a galaxy ahead. This detail matters because access to this technology is broadly distributed. Corporations, governments, universities, startups, and research labs are all developing models, monitoring each other, and adjusting continuously. There is no isolated actor sprinting decades ahead in secrecy that we know of anyway. I believe the military may be onto this, but that will be a separate video for a separate time. Anyway, this mirrors how every major technology diffused historically. Electricity spread region by region. The internet layered in over time. Smartphones reshaped behavior gradually, not instantly. Adoption follows infrastructure, incentives, and institutional readiness. And as of now, based on multiple surveys, you can see that people are actually scared of AI and saying they don't want it integrated into every aspect of their lives. However, we know our governments feel the stress, they feel the competition. You'll hear it again and again in the news. We can't let China win, right? The US has to win the AI race. They have to become the crypto capital of the world. That's a separate conversation. But I feel like crypto and AI go hand in hand. And that's why, once again, I'm bringing you this video. And the reason I bring up the general fear in the public right now, I bring it up as a good thing, mainly because this hesitation is what will prolong AI's full integration into everything and every aspect of our lives. But back to today's topic, because AI is following in the same trajectory as all past technology. And actually, the OECD adoption data shows deployment happening sector by sector, not universally. Platform analysts describe AI as an enabling infrastructure layer that integrates beneath existing systems rather than replacing them overnight. You may have also heard the quote, I think Jensen was the first person to say it, but I have since then heard multiple people say it, and that is that AI will not replace everybody. It's not going to replace every worker, but it is going to replace the workers that do not use AI, or rather, the workers that are using AI will replace everyone else. So if you have not been looking into AI tools and how to use it for your job, for what you do every day to make money, I would recommend you start just ask ChatGPT, hey, what tools could I use for this job, right? That's what I do because this revolution is happening quietly, but it's happening massively. And it represents such a huge advantage for those who do start using it. Anyway, the practical implication is straightforward. Gradual progress creates response time, time to regulate, time to build defenses, time for completing systems to apply pressure and discipline excess. That alone reframes risk. And it leads to the part of Jensen's argument that almost no one discusses, or maybe they just overheard it. And on this note, just quickly, it was actually, what is Dispenza? It's not Dispenza, sorry. And he was actually on, do you know the show by Diamantis where he interviews, or he has his own like talk show version of the All In podcast, and he talks to multiple cutting edge AI scientists and business people. And he actually brought this up. I saw it, man, it must have been over a year ago, where he talks about how he doesn't think AI is going to bring about like the destruction of the world. There may be bad actors that use AI and they will rise up, right? But just in the same way that we have white hat hackers that test systems in advance so that hackers can't go and do malicious activities or hack your system, right? What Diamantis says, and that's essentially what Jensen says here in this interview as well, is that in the same way that there will be bad people using their AI agents to do bad, there will be always, there's a counterbalance in nature. And at the same time, there will be good people rising up using their AIs to fight the bad AIs. And that basically everything will just level up. And that is what is being said here in many words when Jensen says that the future does not look like humans versus machines. I think that's what many people feel and think right now. It's going to be like, oh no, humanity is going to be up against AIs, right? It's more like systems will be competing against other systems. Everyone will have their own AI, or nations will have their own AI systems in the same way that other nations will have their AI systems. And it will be the systems that fight each other. And this framing already exists today. In cybersecurity, attackers deploy software to exploit vulnerabilities. Defenders deploy software to detect, isolate, and neutralize threats. When an exploit appears, information propagates, defenses update, the network hardens. And AI operates the same way. Yes, malicious actors use AI. That is already occurring. That's nothing new. But defensive systems can scale alongside offense. Detection models flag anomalies in advance. Automated responses contain damage. Signals propagate across networks. Jensen highlights a detail most people overlook. In cybersecurity, cooperations dominate competition. Threat intelligence is shared. Vulnerabilities are disclosed. Updates roll out simultaneously. That cooperative architecture is why the internet remains functional. Government agencies like the CISA explicitly document shared defense frameworks. Major security firms already deploy AI systems designed to detect and counter other AI-driven threats in real time. This is important because it changes the risk profile entirely. The future does not resemble a single runaway system. It resembles many systems, monitoring, constraining, and correcting each other continuously. Which brings us to the next misconception, and that is where AI power is actually going. When people hear that AI models are becoming more powerful, they often assume that power translates into loss of control. And once again, I think that's a very common misconception, or rather projection, that humans do in general, right? When we think about anyone or anything, right, we always see them through our own lens. And I've said this before in past videos, if you're not feeling good, the whole world looks down. But if you're upbeat, everything looks rosy, right? Humans even do this with God, right? And I'm not going to get into the God conversation, but, I'm powerful, so God is all powerful. I am knowing, so God is all knowing, right? I actually love God, a separate conversation. But I'm just saying, humans, I am a philosophy major, so I do think about these things deeply. And that is what humans do. We project ourselves into everything around us, especially things unknown, once again. And when we think of people gaining more power, oftentimes they do lose control because power is a lot to handle. But we have to remember we're talking about an intelligent system that gets rewarded for doing good or getting the right answer. And it's going to scale with intelligence as it gains power. Anyway, and in practice, apparently most of that power for these AI machines is being allocated elsewhere. That is, inaccuracy. Early models hallucinated frequently. They sounded confident and were wrong. Engineers treated that as a failure mode, not a feature. So additional compute went into verification, reflection, and internal consistency checks. Systems are now trained to pause, to validate, and reassess before responding. And this actually brings me to another personal hypothesis on what's going to happen in the future. Let me know what you think in the comments. But I actually believe these AI models, we're training them now, but in the very near future, they're going to start training us. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that's going to happen. And that said, I think humans could learn from this equation, right? In learning to pause, learning to validate, and learning to reassess before responding. But separate conversation. Let me know what you think about this hypothesis in the comments. And moving on, research from AI and Anthropic actually show heavy emphasis on reducing hallucinations and improving grounded reasoning through reinforcement learning, through feedback loops, and structured evaluation. Jensen offers an analogy that fits. More horsepower in a car does not inherently make it more dangerous. It allows for better braking systems, better traction control, and greater stability. The vehicle becomes easier to manage at speed. DeepMind's safety research focuses on bounded behavior, reliability, and predictable performance as models scale. The invisible progress is the progress that makes systems steadier, not wilder. And once you understand that, the posture of the people building this technology becomes clear. So let's talk about the mindset of these builders. And on this note, Jensen actually says something rarely quoted. Rarely ever have you heard any entrepreneur ever say this. He said, fear motivates him more than confidence. And I feel like this is a message for all of us because there's so much taboo in acknowledging openly that you're afraid of losing your holdings, afraid of not knowing what is going on. What is going on with AI? What is going on with our future? What is next year going to look like? Right? There's so much taboo on fear. So it's so amazing to hear from Jensen. He's the CEO of like the largest company on the planet. Okay. And for him to publicly say that fear motivates him more than confidence. Can you imagine that vulnerability? Fear of being wrong, fear of missing structural shifts, fear of complacency. It is fear that drives this man. And ever since I heard him say this on Joe Rogan's interview, I swear I feel like a bubble popped, right? Because I have been driven by fear of not doing enough, fear of like basically, yeah, like never doing enough, never being enough, always striving to learn, always pushing, always pushing, always pushing. But there's always somebody who knows more than you, right? There's always someone who has more than you. There's always someone who's more switched on, someone who has a better, right now I'm trying to automate my system for everything that I do. And it's like I see everyone else on YouTube just figuring it out, And there's always this like fear of like that drives me, but then I can't help but hear, the like self-help gurus on like you have to have self-control and be calm and you are enough. This very unrealistic, I want to say, self-help philosophy roaming around in the world. And I feel like, no, after hearing Jensen say it, I just felt like validated and I felt like it's okay. It's okay to be driven by fear. It's okay. It's actually, I think it actually drives you to do more. The minute you feel like you have it all figured out, that's usually when you stop learning, right? It's if you think about like the times in your life when you've had a fire under your butt, you do more, you are better, like you can operate on less sleep, like you are switched on, you can do anything. And I think that is the sweet spot for entrepreneurs is to know that you should be driven by fear of complacency. You should be driven by fear of being replaced. And you should just sit with that and you should accept that. And that doesn't mean you don't go outside for fresh air or on a walk or value time with your family. You should. If anything, it makes you value time with those you love even more because you got to get back to work, you know? Anyway, I was so pleased to hear him talk about his fear so openly. And pressing deeper into this conversation, actually, we have found that founders who build enduring institutions consistently exhibit this trait. Harvard Business Review documents it repeatedly, and Grove called it productive paranoia. Survival depends on continuous reassessment, not celebration. The minute you're celebrating, like you're stunting your growth. And Jensen's background reinforces this discipline. Scarcity, near failure. If you hear a story, I so encourage you to go watch that interview. He shares his story, his upbringing, being an immigrant kid. He lived in some random school in some random city and town in middle America as an 8-year-old, like all by himself at some boarding school. Anyway, it's those experiences that shaped him and shape leaders who treat risk as something to live inside, not something to dismiss or try to get through as fast as possible. I mean, yes, you don't want to stay in like risk, like in a risky situation, right? That's a separate topic. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying like you should live with that fire. If you're trying to build something great or become something great, if you're happy with where you are, then of course, be at peace, But I'm saying, if you're trying to conquer and reach the next level in your life, then we need to come to grips with that and be happy about it and embrace it. So, all right, as we close out today's video, what the 1% understand about AI has nothing to do with secret access or hidden tools. It comes down to mental models. AI is a reasoning system, not a life form. Progress unfolds in increments, not explosions. Defense scales alongside offense, and power flows into reliability. Builders remain composed because they operate within the risk environment, not outside it. That perspective creates an edge in markets, in technology, and in decision making. Finding your calm in the middle of the storm and embracing the storm, not wishing for the storm to go away, but accepting that the storm is here and choosing to breathe. So if today's video helped you reframe how you think about AI or raised questions, let me know what your questions are in the comments section. The point is, these ideas quietly determine who navigates the next decade with clarity. It takes having conversations like this, because the more you know, the more you demystify and are not scared by some invisible boogeyman disguised as AI, right? We have yet to see the way the future pans out. I'm not saying I don't think there will be some big catastrophic event when AI lands in the hands of some corrupt, like super smart teenager that has, unresolved trauma and wants to harm people with the powers of AI he's harnessed into some tool, right? I do believe there will be some event that wakes everybody up. And I've said it before in private conversations, let me know what you think, but I think the minute AI embodied in some robot's body or however hurts an animal, hurts a dog or hurts a cat, like an innocent puppy, that is when people will wake up. Sounds crazy, you would think like it has to hurt a human first. Hopefully that would be a wake up call. People love their animals at just complete irrational levels that the minute AI hurts an innocent little puppy, it'll be like all brakes on. Anyway, let me know what you think of that. But that's what I think. And I think there will be some catastrophic event and it will wake everybody up. And at that point, everyone will align, which is something that Jensen also talks about in his interview with Joe Rogan. And there will be an alliance formed. I believe this is going to happen. And at that point, everyone's going to put in some serious regulation around AI. And it may be too late to completely contain it, but at least this is when the white hat hacker versions of AI agent armies will rise up to defend against the bad actors. But that was a lot to cover for today. So let me know what you think again in the comments section. And I hope you enjoyed today's video. I have asked before to start talking about AI here on my channel because I do think that crypto and AI go hand in hand. They're both cutting edge technologies that will completely revolutionize the future, and they are already doing that now. So hopefully you enjoyed, and I will be back here tomorrow. Love you guys.